Uh, Quickly, I'll tell my crazy story. We talked about this in the A block. Years ago, I was headed west on 70. I was stopped in traffic. A guy hit me, and at this time I'm driving, like a 6-month-old truck. That I love that truck, and the guy hit me and did, I don't know, a couple $1,000s worth of damage to my truck and totaled his truck. And he was with his wife, and they were going out to Earth City. And he didn't wasn't familiar with the area. And at the last minute, he was in the left lane, and he if you know the highway out there, I think there's like 5 or 6 lanes wide. He went from the left lane all the way over to the right lane to get to Earth City, and he missed all sorts of traffic and almost caused another accident, but hit me. So the cop shows up, county cop shows up, and takes all the information. And the guy was very nice about it. He apologized to me. He says, officer, it's all my fault. I was driving along. I'm not from the area. My wife and I are from down in southern Missouri, and we're driving along. And all of a sudden we realized that was our exit. And I just swerved over all the lanes, and it was wrong of me, and I hit him. It was my fault. So, cop goes back in his car. You see him writing out a ticket. I go, that guy's going to get a ticket. I got the ticket because when the officer asked me for my proof of insurance, instead of having my insurance card, back in the day, my insurance agent, when my insurance would renew, they would fax me the copy of my insurance card so I could have it right away rather than wait for it in the mail, as opposed to now you keep it on your phone, back in the day. So when I showed this to the officer, he did not accept it, and he wrote me a ticket for failure to provide proof of insurance. And I was like, I showed you right there. Nope, that's not the original. Okay, where does it say the original? So the way, at least it was way back then, St. Louis County Court works. Everybody goes to court, and this was out in the West County branch out there on Clarkson. Place is packed, and it's like the cattle call, and the judge tells you right up front, if you're going to be in front of me, they called you up 5 at a time. 5 people stood up there, and he said, okay, and he'd read your name off, and you'd say, yeah, you're guilty, not guilty. If you pled not guilty, he told you you were not allowed to give a defense. You had to come back another night for another trial or another inquisition or whatever the heck it was. And most people, I heard people groaning around me, oh man, I'm just going to plead guilty, because they don't want to come back again. So I come back 2 weeks later. They call the docket, and the judge says, we're going to call the docket. When we do this, nobody move. So after the docket's called, we're going to have a recess. So immediately after, I said I was here, I saw the prosecutor, a young guy, point at me, and he pointed at me like don't go anywhere. And so we went into recess, and the prosecutor comes over to me and asked me, okay, how in the world can you plead not guilty in insurance proof of insurance? I go, this is, and I had it in my pocket. I said, this is exactly what I showed the officer. And he says, he wouldn't accept it. I go, no. He says, I had to have the actual card. And he looked at me and he says, you know what? This is sort of ridiculous. He says, no charges, nothing, no court fees. I'm sorry we had to go through this. My apologies. He shouldn't have done that. And I'm going, okay, fine, I agree. But why? See, that's the thing. When you're a police officer, and in any kind of a bureaucratic thing, there's gray areas. You just got to say, not going to worry about that. You know what I'm saying? John's gone again. Oh,
I'm here, Brett.
Okay.
I believe that's called prosecutorial discretion or something like that, right, Brett?
Yeah, as opposed to what they did with Trump, where now it's interesting, all the cases seem to be imploding on the prosecutors, at least on the federal cases. And now there's even talking about the Mershon, Judge Mershon. I mean, how in the world when you're, what's her name? Alicia James, what is her name? Felicia James? What's the Letitia James?
Letitia James. Letitia James.
Okay, how does Letitia James and Fani, whatever her name is, from Atlanta, how do you, in the light of the mandate that Trump has been given, how do you keep continuing on prosecuting this dude? How do you do that? You know what I'm saying?
Well, Will Scharf talked about that on Annie Fry's show. And Will, in fact, I think the word he used was unroll. I might be getting that wrong. But Will used a word to describe that what you'll see happening to a lot of these cases is that they'll just go by the wayside and be favorable to Trump. And then Will also walk through the timeline and how favorable the timeline is for Trump as well. So it looks like the age of lawfare is gone. I mean, at least for now.
Okay, changing topics. Have you seen this ongoing saga in the city of St. Louis where there's this restaurant or some kind of a convenience store that they're trying to open, but the city won't give a permit, and the city, and they're claiming that the reason the city won't give them a permit is because they have Russian ties. Do you know about this weird story?
Yeah, they're Russian agent. I should point out that I only know about this. There's a guy I follow on Twitter named Jason Rivera, who's an independent journalist, and he's been all over this case. But I don't follow it that well, Brad. Can you explain it to me?
Well,
so the city believes that these folks are Russian agents. Are they tied to Hamas?
I don't.
Or what's the connection?
I don't know. I saw the picture of them. Matter of fact, looking at it again today, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, when you think of people that are, Russian agents, you don't normally think of, and don't yell at me for being prejudiced, but you don't normally think of black people because, quite honestly, there are not a lot of black people in Russia. It's very rare to have, you have ethnic minorities, but usually, people who are, you can't call them African American, but people who are black people. What's the term, the non-specific term you can't.
I don't know. I don't know what could be said that doesn't sound wildly offensive.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Back in the day, they were known as colored people. And I know now if you say that, people go, oh my God, because to this day, NAACP stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Am I kidding about that or what?
No, you're actually right. And if anybody doubts it, go talk to Nimrod Chappelle.
Right. Okay, let me see if I can find this story again. Because I saw the picture and I thought to myself, okay, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. It's not on the front page of the Post anymore. To me, it looks like they're all black, and some deal about they say the city won't give them a permit, and it's because of the fact that they're being accused of being Russian spies. I'm going like, okay. Now, John, let's chop this up a little bit. Do you think Russia would spend money and time and effort putting spies in North City? I mean,
I think so. I mean, first of all, I did see that a lot of Russian companies applied for St. Louis Development Corporation grants, and whatever they asked for, they got double.
Are you serious?
No.
Oh, I was going for a minute.
But I do think that Russia would look here and say, well, if we were going to infiltrate a municipal government, it doesn't seem like it would be that hard to get into St. Louis city government.
It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, we touched on that. I thought you had a little bit more on that. I thought you might have.
No, and so, but what is the city side of the? Has the city unveiled, so to speak, what they know about these folks, or do they just say, "Nah, we kind of think you're Russians"?
I'll be honest with you. I haven't delved into it that deeply. But what I see is, and see, here we go once again. Municipal government holds so many people's lives and businesses in their hand. If they decide, we don't want that business here, it doesn't happen there. You know what I mean? And to a certain extent, this is the thing that's frustrating to me when you hear. And I'll give perfect examples. You give, I started my business back, 40 years ago. I started my business in Hazelwood. They couldn't have been any more anti-business than they were. I mean, to the point where I could have stood on my head and done backflips, and they would go, oh, okay, now you need to stand on your toes and do front flips. It was that kind of experience. And finally I went, you know what, I'm out of here. And I ended up in Overland. And the crazy thing about that was the mayor, who I think his name was Frank Munch at the time, who never met me, one time at a city council meeting when once again I was sort of getting grilled in trying to move my business to Overland, he stood up and he says, look, this guy's trying to start his business. He's a young guy. I was at the time a young guy. He's a young guy. He's trying to bring business into our community. Let's give this guy a break. And then they all say, okay, fine, we approve. It was going like, my dad was there with me because my dad a long time ago, my dad was the city engineer for Bridgeton. I don't know if I told you that or not, but he was a city civil engineer for Bridgeton. And he had, obviously some experience with city government. And he sort of looked at me and go like, well, that was good.
But also, Brad, I mean, if you don't crack down on some of these businesses, you have crazy guys on Osage Ridge Road climbing transmitters with one arm and a gimpy leg and one functional eyeball. And you look up there and you say, why isn't local government trying to protect us from this?
Right. Whatever. Okay. The thing that's got the CNN crowd and the MSNBC crowd in a tizzy is Pete Segwit? What's his name again?
Oh, this is so good. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Brad.
The interesting thing about it is, he's this, once again, He's, what, a 20-year Army veteran, had combat tours duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. And you look at the guy, and visually, he looks like he should be on a recruiting poster from the Army, right? The Army needs you. You look just like me. You know you do. Come and join the Army. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. He should be now, he wouldn't have been on a recruiting poster 30 years ago because he has numerous tattoos and he looks a little rough. But today, we'll take him.
Right. He's been the weekend Fox anchor for Fox and Friends. He does Saturday and Sunday mornings. And he's, I've seen him in action before. I mean, not in action like in combat or anything like that, but I've seen him where he's been, in a situation where he's, not prompt. He's not reading off a teleprompter. And he's a pretty sharp guy. And he's very, very, very much in the camp of the Army has lost its way. The Army has lost its focus on the fact that they are first and foremost a fighting force, and they're not the DEI department, gone astray. Correct? Isn't that pretty much what he's sort of espoused through the years?
Yeah, and I have to admit, excuse me, my ignorance there, because I don't watch a lot of, in fact, I don't watch any national news shows, so I really had to catch up on this gentleman last night. Brad, who was the Biden appointee, the guy that was in a dress, and what was their title? I mean, I know there's multiple of them, but who was the military leader that's a guy that Biden appointed as a woman? You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's a general. But then there were the other bizarre one was the guy who was like way up the head in the nuclear regulatory commission, who was stealing women's luggage at the airports. You know that story?
Yes, yeah, the luggage thief.
Right. I don't know. I see. Once again, I'm thinking to myself. See, the interesting thing about this is you and I have touched on this a couple times since the election. And I listened to a show last night, of all crazy things, on NPR, and they were talking about this, that they were essentially saying, yeah, maybe the progressives did go a little bit too far. Maybe the progressives got to the point where when they were trying to help the Latinos, they called them Latinx or Latinx, whatever, and the Latinos didn't like that. But, of course, they didn't ask the Latinos. They just decided, well, you're Latinx or Latinx. And they're essentially saying, Look at the numbers that people voted for Trump. All the people you would never have thought would voted for Trump. And they're essentially saying, progressive might have pushed this too far. I talk about the pendulum thing. And unfortunately, I'm going to say this. I think the pendulum's going to swing back too far the other way. And in another 3 years, we're going to, that Trump, look what he did. He came in and he hired this crazy, weird Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to, make the government, run better. And he hired this guy off of Fox TV to be the Department of, the Secretary of Defense. And he hired this guy, and this guy's unqualified. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do think we'll see some of that, Brad. But I think more likely in the short term, because of the numbers of minorities that increasingly voted for Trump this election, I think we're going to see more stories about the rise of Latinx fascism. I hear there's a big fascist trend among Latinxes and the blacks and the minorities. That's what I hear. I mean, what else could explain them voting for a monster like Donald Trump?
But the interesting thing about it was one of the things they brought up last night when I was listening to this, they were talking about the fact that a large number of immigrants who came to this country legally, and specifically the Latino immigrants, voted for Trump because they're tired of seeing the double standard, that the hoops they had to jump through are no longer there anymore. And the crazy thing about it is, if you listen to Armstrong and Getty, they have this they play this all the time. It is so funny. What's the knucklehead who is the DHS guy right now? Who's the guy who's
Mayorkas?
Yeah, the border's secure. He did this one interview where he's being asked if he can come. I can't remember where this is from. The reference of this was he's sort of being pinned down by one of the Republican legislators as to, when can we expect to have you come back to us and give us the answers to your question? And he says things like, I'm very busy today. I'm very, very busy tomorrow. I'm very busy Wednesday. I'm very busy Thursday. I'm very busy. They keep playing this all the time. And then they play that the border is secure. He says it all the time. And it's to the point where the interesting part of this is, and once again, I think this is the difference between the election between Trump and Harris that people finally got to the point where they're going like, okay, we heard that the laptop was fake. It wasn't. We heard that Joe Biden is the sharpest guy in the room. He wasn't. We heard that the border was secure. He wasn't. We heard that Kamala Harris was the world's best candidate to be the next president. She wasn't. And people are finally going like, okay, we're done with this. We're doing something else. I mean, don't you, to a certain extent, think that it's what you can fool the what's the old saying? You can fool me once, you can fool me twice, you can fool me 3 times, you can fool me 4 times, but on the 5th time, I get wise. Isn't that what it essentially happened?
It's something to that effect. Well, and it's never just one thing, but you add that sort of bias on top of the fact that you're still going to the grocery store. You're still looking at either your savings account or, God forbid, your credit card debt. And you say, whatever is going on here isn't working.
Well, John, I'll give you a perfect example. I looked at a Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, bottom of the line Toyota Tacoma pickup truck, 5 years ago. MSRP was $21,000. Okay, that exact same truck today, and we're not talking, different model, exact same truck is $31,000. How many? And go through all the different things that you used to be able to buy. Now, the interesting thing was, I heard a thing yesterday. They're talking about this is sort of interesting. There's, what the most unbelievable drop in price has been. There's one thing that almost every home has, at least one of, which is on the list of the biggest price drops over the last 10 years. Take a guess what it is.
Oh, man. Not going to be a heater because you can't use certain chemicals in your air conditioning anymore. Gosh, I don't have any idea. Not a generator. What would it be, Brad?
Televisions. They said
okay.
They said that, and it's true because I know someone that just recently had their TV go out and they paid like $1,200 for 48-inch TV. They bought another 48-inch TV, $230. It's to the point where it's like.
Yeah. And so what's the rationale for that? Just so much competition or technology or what?
A lot of competition, and what's happened is the manufacturing process has gotten much more sophisticated. And not only that, if you get into the electronics, they have this thing, I don't know if they're still using the term, but it used to be called VLSI, very large scale integration. Back in the old days, if you had, like say a piece of equipment, maybe you had like 50 different components in it, a bunch of ICs, resistors, capacitors, stuff like that. Now it's got 3 because what they do is they make big monstrous chips that do all the things, those smaller chips. So it makes the equipment cheaper. It makes it the manufacturing process, better, more efficient, and interestingly enough, it makes it more reliable because there's less components. The less components you have, the less there is to go wrong. You know what I mean? So
I do know. However, we still need to reboot the Westplex computer every other morning, right, Brad?
John, he's already.
Should I get you a laptop for our 1-year anniversary?
You know what, John? You know what? I feel this pain in my side. Oh my God, there's a knife in my ribs. How did that happen? Okay, we have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?